T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Hello and welcome to the Leadership Launchpad. My name is Matt Jertson, the founder of Better Everyday Studios. And today we're going to have a solo episode where I want to talk about bureaucracy, everybody's favorite topic, or more specifically, why bureaucracy destroys organizations and how to fix it. It's kind of interesting. It's interesting why I would even think of this as a topic, because today I work with a lot of smaller organizations that don't always succumb to a lot of the problems of bureaucracy. But I started my career in the U.S. Air Force, and the military is, I think, quite literally the largest bureaucracy on the planet. And so there's some interesting things that I've noticed throughout my career about why bureaucracy really hurts organizations. One specific way that I want to talk about, and then give you some examples of ways that I've seen leaders get past this, and things that both at the top level of organizations and frontline leaders, things that you need to do to make sure this doesn't destroy your organization. Bureaucracy is a term that gets thrown around a lot, so I wanted to start off with a little bit of definitional work. So, of course, what do you do these days? I went to ChatGPT and I just said, hey, what is the definition of bureaucracy? And I want to read it exactly. So this is what it said. It said, bureaucracy is a structured way of managing complex organizations through layers of management and standardized processes. A few of the distinct features is a clear hierarchy of authority, formal rules and procedures, divisions of labor and specialization, impersonal relationships to ensure fairness, and written documentation of actions and decisions. I'm actually a big believer in bureaucracy. I think a lot of those things that I just listed, having a clear hierarchy of authority. You need to know who can say yes and no to things. That makes a lot of sense. Formalized rules and procedures. I remember one time reading a report that the Air Force did on the early days of SpaceX, and they were really, one of the key red flags they mentioned with SpaceX is that SpaceX relies on individual excellence as opposed to proven process in order to ensure a specific result. The military is all about process. If we want to do anything in any kind of standard way or ensure an outcome, you got to have some process. Division of labor and specialization. That's kind of what the whole economy is based off of. Like, capitalism is based on this idea of division of labor and specialization. So there's lots of things about bureaucracies that I personally think are really, really important. And I think because of all these good things that they do, one important thing that a lot of people don't realize when they're inside growing organizations is that the creation and expansion of bureaucracy, in my opinion, not only is it probably generally a good thing, but it also just happens. It's like a law of physics. And I often say that the people who are most disdainful of bureaucracy are the ones that are most likely to succumb to it. Because and you see this again and again in organizations, that an organization that's small and scrappy, and we want to be able to make decisions quickly and move fast, and we don't have bureaucracy, we don't have layers, and then the company starts to grow, and it's just like, oh yeah, I guess we do need a couple layers, or oh, I guess we do need to have a formal way of making these decisions. And they kind of do it haphazardly rather than like looking forward and looking ahead and planning it out. And so it kind of gets created with no rhyme or reason. And that is when companies really get destroyed and constrained by red tape, when they don't think about how they're going to make these rules and have a process for making the process, honestly. And so that's the first thing that I wanted to point out, is that I don't think bureaucracy is inherently bad. I think it has a lot of excellent features. It's something that's necessary to bring large groups of people together to do things in organized ways, but you need to get ahead of it and plan for it. Now, no matter how much you do that, I do still think there is one particular challenge with bureaucracy that really grinds a lot of organizations down. And I wanted to bring it up because I've honestly never heard anyone else talk about this specific thing that often comes up with bureaucracy. And I saw this in the military. I saw it at SpaceX. I've seen it at virtually every organization, every large organization that I've ever been a part of. And that's this, that in my opinion, in large bureaucracies, almost all of the most important things that would impact day-to-day people and the day-to-day work, not the big strategy, not, what direction are we going, what product are we going to launch, not that stuff, but the day-to-day stuff of, how is parking organized? What email do we use? Where do we store our documentation? All of those decisions, for some reason, either fall above people's pay grade or below people's pay grade, right? And I'm using the term pay grade, just because I'm from the military, and so in the military, rank structure is referred to as pay grade. You have like O1 is a second lieutenant, O2 is a first lieutenant. So there's pay grades, and the same thing with the government services, where there's like GS4, GS5. And so basically, I'm just referring to authority levels, or the level that you have within an organization. And so, you might say that, like, let's use just like a super simple example of something like a parking problem, or you want to open up new parking spaces. There's a whole bunch of parking spaces in the front of the building that are all reserved for something that never gets used, and so you want to change that. And you bring it to, your boss, and they say, "Oh, I don't have anything about this. Go talk to facilities." And so you go talk to the first person you know in facilities and say, well, I can't make that decision. I don't know who made that decision. And then it goes up to their boss, and then pretty soon you get to like the director of facilities, and they're like, "Why are you even talking to me about this? This is silly." There's all these like little things that either the individual can't act on, or they're by the time it gets to a level where a person can just make a decision, they don't care, because it seems like too small of an issue. A really great example of this that I heard of recently from my reserve duties at Air Force or at Space Systems Command. Is at Space Systems Command. This was several years ago. They were trying really hard to bring on new partners, new civilian partners, where they were working with smaller companies, bringing on startups and things like that. And the hardest problem that they were having, the thing that was limiting how quickly they could bring on these new partners, was security clearances. They had to, and not just security clearances, there was some kind of badging and investigation in order to just let them get on the facility. And so a full-bird colonel, so an 06 that I knew, he was really trying to run this down. So he did a whole like process mapping of the entire process of getting somebody onto the base, and found there was one spot where they were having problems. There was one particular decision, part of this process of getting them approved that was taking a really long time. And he went to them and he asked them, "Why are you doing it this way? Can you do it differently?" And the person said, "No, I can't do it differently. There's this Air Force instruction that says this is how we have to do this thing." And so this is somebody, now bear in mind, for those of you who don't have a military background, an 06 is somebody, they've been in the military for probably at least like 20 years. This is a very high level person, and they don't have they couldn't just say, "No, don't do that. We're going to do this other thing," because the Air Force instruction was doing it. In the Air Force instruction, it said, "Who's the waiver authority?" And like a lot of Air Force instructions, it was set very high, and it said like the Secretary of the Air Force is the waiver authority for this particular process. So, clearly the person on the ground couldn't make a decision. This 06 couldn't make a decision. Nobody on the base, this really important thing that was the number one limiting factor for this base to be able to accomplish their mission, nobody on that base had the authority to change the process that would make the whole situation better and allow them to actually do their job. Right? Nobody on the base. In fact, there was only one person in the entire Air Force who could do it, and it was literally the top-ranking person in the entire Air Force. That's what I mean. Like this top-ranking person, they're somebody who, they're deciding like giant strategy. They're signing off on multi-billion-dollar acquisitions projects. Like, why would they be involved in some small little day-to-day, let's waive, what you have to do in order to get somebody on base at Space Systems Command? It seems way below their pay grade. So it's above everybody's pay grade, But the person who the Air Force instruction said was supposed to be doing it, why would they care? So I see this again and again in these kinds of examples, in just day-to-day work of why do we do things a certain way. All the people on the ground are sitting there going, who can change this? And nobody knows who can change it. And so bureaucracy creates these weird situations where there's a clear need to have bureaucracy, where you want to have a formalized decision-making process. You want to have, certain authorities and certain standard ways of doing things, but it creates these separations where the things that are really going to impact the day-to-day, for some reason, they can never flow up to the right level of authority so that they can actually be changed. And so the middle ground that I think we have to find here, the way we solve this problem, is by recognizing that bureaucracy is important and planning for it, like we talked about earlier, but by not treating the bureaucracy as the most important thing, not treating the process as the most important thing, and be completely willing to dismiss it if it's going to serve the end result of making us perform better, because the performance is what actually matters. So we have this bureaucracy, but we're willing to get rid of it. And to make this clear, what I think this means is there's two very specific examples that I want to use. One from the top down and another from the bottom up. So the top down example actually comes from Mark Andreessen and the way he's been talking about Elon Musk, and also from my experience, how I've seen Elon Musk work at places like SpaceX and Tesla. Tesla is the best example, I think, where Tesla, it's a massive organization, right? We're talking about, I forget how big, but we're talking tens of thousands of people easily. It's a huge organization. So it's clear that there's a bureaucracy. And I remember years ago hearing Elon talk about how important he was to the success of Tesla, and how, if I'm not here, this isn't going to get done. If I'm not doing it, we're not going to succeed. And I remember at the time thinking that this sounded really foolish, that he just had a huge ego, because of course, things are going to move faster if he's the one there, right? He's the CEO. So, whereas some engineer is going to look at a problem and be like, oh, okay, here's the solution. And they're going to propose it to their manager, and the manager is going to propose it to the director, and the director is going to go to the VP, and the VP is going to approve it. Elon can just be like, yes, right? He can just sit there with the engineer, approve it. So of course things are going to move faster if you're out there on the floor. That doesn't make you special. And I don't know what's going on in his mind. But now, having listened to Mark Andreessen talk about the way Elon works, where he was describing this from a slightly different vantage point, I realize that that's exactly the point. Bureaucracy, right, by its nature, is creating all these barriers to decision making, right? And some of that is good, but it creates this separation where the things that need to be decided can't get decided because they're either above or below people's pay grade. The way Elon works is, and this is according to Mark Andreessen, whatever the number one problem of the company is at any given time, Elon is willing to go anywhere in the bureaucracy that he needs to go in order to solve that problem, right? He's the CEO, he's going to sit down with the director. He's the CEO, he's going to sit down with the manager. He's the CEO, he's going to sit down with the engineer on the floor, get their idea, and just approve it right there. Completely eliminate all those layers of bureaucracy, right? And so now, obviously, that can create problems, right? The thing that it solves is it allows real problems to get solved. It's assuming if it's the limiting factor of the organization, it just gets solved like that. Is it going to piss off all those layers of managers in between? Maybe, if you have the wrong culture. But as long as you have a culture where it's known, look, we have bureaucracy for a reason. We have standard processes for a reason. But if there is a thing that is blocking the critical path of the company, the CEO is just going to intervene, and you just got to deal with it, right? It's not bad on you. We're all busy, but their job is to focus on the most important thing. And so they're going to keep us moving. They're going to make those approvals. They're going to waive the rule. They're going to say yes to the project just so we can keep moving faster, right? So from a top-down strategy, the way to defeat bureaucracy or to make sure bureaucracy doesn't create these strangleholds on your company is by having higher level leadership be willing to dive through all those layers and then create a culture where all those layers realize that's not bad on them. We're all busy. It's all okay. It's just this thing kind of fell through the cracks and this person's and we're gonna solve it now and move on. So from the top down, that's how you fight against this. But that's not super satisfying because most of the people listening to this aren't, executives in an organization. So what about from the bottom up? Well, the bottom up, what needs to happen is every leader needs to be more willing to champion the needs of their team, essentially. So going back to that example that I had from before of Space Systems Command, where there was this problem that this Air Force instruction said, this is the way we have to do something. Doing it that way was taking a really long time, and the waiver authority was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. So what did that 06 do, right? Like I said, they did not have the authority to waive this. Nobody on the base had the authority to waive this. Only one person in the entire Air Force had the authority to waive this. So what did they do? They got on a plane. They flew to Washington, D.C. They got time on the Chief of Staff's of the Air Force calendar somehow and asked for that waiver. They did the work. They did the research to realize that this is the critical point. This is the limiting factor for my entire organization. I'm going to take that in a very clear, concise message and say, sir, can you please waive this? Right? So it's not going off on a whim. It's not screaming to the heavens of, I need to talk to the president. I need to talk to the CEO. I need to talk to whoever in order to get this thing wrong because my people are complaining. It's taking those complaints from your people, really doing the work to analyze why this is the most important thing, and then running that up the flagpole as high as you need to go. I bet if you think about this, think about your position, your role in your organization, and think about the things that are most challenging to you day to day, I guarantee you can come up with a list of half a dozen things that aren't really big. They're just the day-to-day, where you have to park, who has to approve things, that make your job really difficult. And the frustrating thing about them is you have no idea who to go to in order to make those changes. That's the challenge that bureaucracy presents. All the great things that it does of letting tons of people come together and work towards a common goal, it has this flaw in that there's lots of day-to-day things that just fall through the cracks where nobody's clearly responsible for them. And if you want to and I really do believe that this is the thing that bogs companies down, and the way to solve it is through these two approaches of top down and bottom up. From the top down, you got to create a culture where it's okay for higher level leadership to dive through multiple levels of the organization to solve a particular problem, and that's seen as okay. And we also need to make it okay for a frontline supervisor or manager, once they do the work to clearly show the compelling case of this is a really important thing, and if we make just this one change, it's going to solve all these problems, it's going to save a lot of time, it's going to save a lot of money. It needs to be okay for them to go talk to and make their case to whoever they need to. And again, it shouldn't seem like you're jumping the chain in either direction, right? Because that's really, we need to respect the chains of authority, usually, these levels of authority, but not at the expense of the performance of the organization. We need to make sure that it's okay to jump over that bureaucracy in either direction. I hope you found that helpful. I hope it gave you something to think about. Like I said, I've been in these massive organizations and I've seen that this is the particular thing that seems to pop up again and again. So if you found this interesting, definitely make sure you share this episode with somebody else in your life that you think might find it interesting. If this is your first time listening to the show, please make sure you subscribe, and I will see you next time on the Leadership Launchpad.